Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Rasha Rosdenelka, and I will be serving as your moderator for today's seminar. It is truly an honor to facilitate these academic discussions, and I hope we will all benefit greatly from the presentations and conversations that follow. Before we begin, allow me to go over a few housekeeping rules to ensure our session runs smoothly. First, each presenter will be given 15 minutes to present their work. Please respect the time allocation so that all 6 presenters will have equal opportunity to share their research. And second, please ensure your mobile phones are on silent mode throughout the sessions. And third, if you have a questions, please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged before speaking. Thank you for cooperation. Now, without any further ado, let us begin our presentations. Okay, our first presenter today is me, Rasha Rosdinelka. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rasha Rosdinelka with student ID 222-323-0093. And today I will be presenting my research article titled The Effect of Technology Mediated Feedback on EFL Learners' Writing Performance. So let me begin. Next slide, please. Okay, let me begin with the background of this study. So, writing is widely considered one of the most complex skills in EFL learning. Learners must simultaneously manage content, organizations, vocabulary, grammar, and discourse conversations, all at once. It is cognitively demanding, and many Indonesian university students struggle with it. In this process, feedback plays important roles. It helps learners identify gaps in their writing, revise their texts, and gradually internalize the norms of the target language. With the rapid growth of digital technology in education, a new form of feedback has emerged, what we call technology mediated feedback, or TMF. And this includes tools like Grammarly, Google Classroom, and other e-feedback platforms that provide immediate and accessible feedback to learners. However, despite its growing popularity, empirical evidence on TMF in the Indonesian EFL context remain very limited, particularly research that examines writing quality across all dimensions, not just grammatical accuracy. This gap motivated the present study. Next slide, please. Okay. Based on the background, this study is guided by one central research question. Does technology-mediated feedback significantly improve EFL learners' writing performance compared to conventional written feedback? What sets this study apart is its holistic assessment approach. Rather than focusing only on grammar, I assessed writing performance across five dimensions: content, organizations, vocabulary, language use, and mechanics. This study is also specifically situated in the Indonesian EFL context in Banten province, an area that has received relatively little research attention. Next slide, please. Now let me walk you through the methodology. This study employed a quasi-experimental pre-test, post-test control group design. The participants were 64 third semester undergraduate students divided into two intake classes. Class A with 32 students as the experimental group and Class B with 32 students as the control group. Both classes were taught by the same instructor to minimize teacher variability. The interventions lasted 8 weeks. The experimental group received TMF through two platforms, Grammarly for automated linguistic and stylistic feedback, and Google Classroom for instructor e-feedback and peer feedback. The control group, meanwhile, received a conventional written feedback on printed essay drafts, no digital tools involved. The assessment instrument was the ESL Composition Profile rubric by Jacobs et al., covering 5 dimensions: content worth 30 points, organizations 20 points, vocabulary 20 points, language use 25 points, and mechanics 5 points, totaling 100 points. Iterator reliability was R equal 94, indicating excellent consistency between the two raters. Data were analyzed using SPSS version 26, applying paired sample t-tests for within group comparisons and independent sample t-tests between group comparisons at a significance level of A equals 0.05. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's look at the findings. At pretest, both groups had comparable mean scores. The experimental group averaged 62.34 and the control group is 61.97. This confirms that both groups started an equal baseline. After 8 weeks of interventions, however, a clear divergence emerged. The experimental group reached a post-test mean of 76.53, reflecting a gain of 14.19 points. The control group reached only 68.22, with a gain of just 6.25 points. In other words, the experimental group improved by more than double compared to the control group. This already gives us a compelling picture of TMF's effectiveness. Next slide, please. Okay, to confirm that these differences are statistically meaningful, I conducted inferential tests. The paired sample t-test showed that both groups improved significantly from pre-test to post-test. The experimental group yielded 31 equals 12.43 p less than 0.001, and the control group 31 equals 5.71 p less than 0.001. More importantly, the independent sample t-test on post-test scores revealed that the experimental group significantly outperformed the control group. 62 equals 4.86 p less than 001 with a coherence d of 1.18, classified as a large effect size. Leven's test confirmed homogeneity of variance, meaning all statistical assumptions were satisfied. This tells us that TMF produced a, substantially and statistically significant advantage in writing performance over conventional feedback, and the effect is not just significant, it is practically meaningful. Next slide, please. Okay. Let's look at which writing dimension benefited most from TMF. The largest gains in the experimental group were in language use, with a mean gain of 4.85 points, and vocabulary with 3.62 points. This makes intuitive sense. Grammarly excels at providing real-time linguistic feedback, flagging grammatical errors, inappropriate register, and lexical repetitions. Moderate gains were observed in organizations at 2.91 points and content at 2.17 points. The smallest gain was in mechanics, only 0.64 points, most likely due to a ceiling effect, as students already had relatively high baseline scores in this area. One important takeaway here, the comparatively modest gains in contents suggest that current AWE tools like Grammarly have limitations when it comes to higher order rhetorical and argumentative skills. These require more nuanced dialogic feedback that automated system cannot yet fully replicate. Next slide, please. So, why did TMF work so effectively? There are several interconnected explanations. First, the immediacy of Grammarly's feedback allowed learners to identify and correct errors during the drafting process itself, not after submissions as with conventional feedback. This aligns with Harry and Timperley's 2007 feedback models, which states that feedback is most effective when it is timely, specific, and task-directed. And second, the asynchronous nature of Google Classroom gave learners the flexibility to revisit instructor and peer comments across multiple revision cycles without the time pressure of face-to-face interactions. This promoted deeper, more reflective engagement with feedback. And third, from a social cultural theory perspective, both Grammarly and Google Classroom functions as semiotic tools that mediate learners' cognitive engagement with writing conventions consistent with Vygotsky concepts of tool-mediated activity. These findings are also consistent with prior international research by Ranalli, Stephenson, and Pakiti, and in and Upton, while extending the work of Saputra and Marzulina by providing robust quantitative evidence in the Indonesian AFL context. Next slide, please. Okay, to conclude, this study provides clear evidence that TMF through Grammarly and Google Classroom produce significantly greater writing improvements that conventional feedback with a large effect size, 62 equals 4.86, P less than 0.001, and D equals 1.18. The practical implications are therefore threefold. First, educators should use TMF as a complement, not a replacement, to existing feedback strategies. Second, AWE tools should be paired with explicit instructions and rhetorical and argumentative skills, given that content development showed the weakest gains. Third, peer feedback within a Google Classroom should be systematically scaffolded through training to maximize its contribution to organization and content. For future research, I recommend exploring the longitudinal effects of TMF, investigating digital literacy as a moderating variable, and examining learner perception through the mixed method approach. That concludes my presentations. I sincerely welcome your questions, feedback, and insights. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay. Is there any questions? If not, we're moving on to our second presenter. Please welcome Ibnu Khawiyul Amin. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Rasha. Sorry, suaranya jelas gak ya?
Yes, your voice is clear, Ibnu.
Yeah, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Today, I will present my seminar research title about football-based speaking activities and student self-efficacy, their correlation with speaking performance in EFL context. So, I choose this topic because the moment class ends and we start talking about our favorite football match, everyone suddenly becomes so fluent and passionate. That's why I wanted to investigate if there's a scientific connection between our self-confidence and our speaking performance when the topic aligns with something we love, like football. So, for the background of the study, as the AFL student in Indonesia, we all know that speaking is arguably the most essential yet challenging skill to master. Because English is taught as a foreign language here, we don't really use it outside the classroom as a boundaries. This creates a massive problem when we are required to speak up in front of the class. We get anxious, we hesitate, and we become too terrified of making grammatical mistake or receiving negative feedback. But previous studies show that these difficulties are not just about grammar or vocabulary limitation, it's highly psychological. This is where self-efficacy comes into play. According to Bandura, self-efficacy is a person's specific belief in their own capability. If a student has high self-efficacy, the approach starts with the confidence and persistence. When a topic is meaningful and close to our personality, we generate ideas much faster. In our university environment, football is incredibly popular. My peers talk about match, transfer news, and tactics every single day. This daily casual discussion naturally require complex speaking skills like explain, arguing, and predicting. Next slide, please. So, for the research question, is there a significant correlation between student self-efficacy and their speaking performance in football-based speaking activities within an EFL context? Next slide, please. In line with the question, the objective of this research is straightforward: to investigate and determine whether students who possess higher level of self-efficacy also demonstrate better speaking performance when they are engaged in football-related communication tasks within an EFL environment. Next slide, please. So, for the literature review, let's review the theoretical framework supporting this study. First, we look at self-efficacy and language learning. Albert Bandura stated that self-efficacy isn't just a general self-confidence. It is completely task-specific. In speaking class, high self-efficacy makes students more willing to take risks and actively engage in classroom interaction. And for the second one, speaking performance in EFL context, speaking is highly demanding because it happens in real time, leaving no room for planning or revision. Academic assessment criteria usually evaluate five main core components: fluency, pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and comprehensibility. And the next one is football-based speaking activities. When we talk about interest-based learning, the biggest advantage is topic familiarity. Because students already have background knowledge about football, they don't have to struggle to generate content. They can focus entirely on language production. Based on this theory, the conceptual framework assumes that self-efficacy directly influences oral output. Therefore, my working hypothesis is that there is a significant positive correlation between student self-efficacy and their speaking performance during this football-based text. Next slide, please. So, the next slide is research methodology. Now we talk about the methodology. This study adopts a quantitative approach using a correlational research design. This design is perfect because my main goal was to identify the direction and strength of the relationship between our two variables without manipulating them. For the setting and participant, this research was conducted at our own campus, especially in the English education department during this academic year. I used purposive sampling technique to select a few students. I want to emphasize that these participants are generally my own peer and friends who meet specific criteria. They have complete basic speaking course and they are actively interested in football media, match, and discussion. They share the same hobby and background context as me. To collect data, I use two instruments. For the first one is self-efficacy questionnaire, consisting of 25 statements dated from Bandura's theory, measured using a 5-point like scale. For the second one is speaking performance assessment, where my friends participate in actual football-based tasks like small group match analysis, oral presentation, and short debates. Their speaking performance was recorded and followed using an analytical rubric covering the 5 components I mentioned earlier. I use descriptive statistics, run a normality test as a prerequisite, and then calculate the correlation using the person product moment formula. Next slide, please. So for research findings, first, the descriptive statistics show that the mean score for student self-efficacy was 82.45, which is relatively high, with a minimum score of 65 and a maximum of 96. For speaking performance, the average score was 80.18. This indicates that overall, the participants demonstrate very satisfactory speaking outcome during the football task. Before running the correlation, I conducted a normality test. The significant value for self-efficacy was 128, and for speaking performance was 0.94. Since both values are greater than 0.05, it proved that our data is normally distributed and perfectly meet the assumption for parametric testing. For the primary answer to our research question, the Pearson correlation analysis revealed an R value with a significant value. Because the p-value is much lower than 0.05, the null hypothesis is successfully rejected. This statistically proves that there is a significant, strong positive correlation between student self-efficacy and their speaking performance in football-based activities. Furthermore, the coefficient of determination is 465, meaning that 46.5% of the variance in my friends' Speaking performance can be directly explained by their self-efficacy level. Next slide, please. So, for the discussion, the data clearly show that students with stronger self-efficacy achieve better scores because instead of wasting cognitive energy worrying about grammar mistake or pronunciation slips, they focus completely on delivering their opinions and defending their favorite teams. The integration of football worked beautifully as a psychological buffer. Because my friends were talking about something they genuinely enjoy and master in real life, they did not feel the typical classroom pressure. Familiarity with the content allowed them to speak naturally and maintain long, meaningful interaction with their peers. It directly minimized foreign language classroom anxiety. However, we must also look at the remaining 3.5% of the variance. This reminds us that while psychological readiness and confidence are massive accelerator, speaking proficiency is still multidimensional. It is also influenced by other factors such as vocabulary mastery, for grammar competence, and language exposure outside of class. Next slide, please. So for the conclusion and implication for my research is, this study successfully demonstrates a strong positive correlation between self-efficacy and speaking performance within an interest-based context. Learners believe about their abilities are vital for oral communication success. The pedagogical implication for us as future English teacher is very clear. We should not focus exclusively on mechanical language building or standard grammar rules. We must also design speaking tasks that leverage our student real-life hobbies and personal interests, whether it is football, music, or movie, and anything else. By bringing authentic topics that students love into the classroom, we can naturally boost their self-efficacy, reduce hesitation, and maximize their communicative competence. Next slide, please. Oh, and there's some reference. Maybe that's all for me. I will give it back to Rasya as a moderator. Thank you everyone. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we are now halfway through our sessions, and I am pleased to introduce our third presenter, Maulana Krishna Handika. Please, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Rasha. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for the opportunity given to me. My name is Maulana Krisnandika. Today, I would like to present my research proposal entitled The Influence of English Language Exposure on the Writing Skills of Non-English Department Students. Next slide, please. First one is background. Writing is one of the most important skills in learning English because it allows students to communicate ideas effectively. However, many non-English department students still experience difficulties in writing, especially in vocabulary usage, grammar, and organizing ideas. At the same time, students are frequently exposed to English through movies, music, YouTube videos, social media, and other online content. This exposure provides authentic language input that might help students improve their vocabulary, grammar awareness, and writing ability. Therefore, I am interested in investigating whether English language exposure has an influence on student writing skills. Next slide. So there's the problem identification. Based on the background, several problems can be identified. First, many students still face difficulties in English writing. Second, students often have limited vocabulary and grammar knowledge. Third, the amount of English exposure differs among students. Fourth, Many students rarely use English outside the classroom. Lastly, there are still limited studies that specifically investigate the influence of English exposure on writing skills among non-English department students. Okay, next slide, please. So there's the research focus. The first one is research gap. Previous students mainly focus on vocabulary learning and were mostly conducted with English major students. In contrast, this study focused on writing skills and involves non-English department students. Therefore, this research aimed to fill the gap by examining the direct influence of English language exposure on writing skills. Okay, based on this gap, the research questions are: the first one is how much English language exposure do non-English department students receive? Second, what is level of their writing skills? Third is there a significant influence of English language exposure on writing skills? The objectives are to identify student English exposure, to measure student writing skills, and to analyze the influence of English exposure on writing skills. Next slide, please. So the next slide is theoretical foundation, theoretical framework. The study is based on two main variables. The first variable is language exposure. Exposure refers to the amount of English input students receive through through movies, music, books, social media, and online platform. The second variable is writing skills. Writing skills involves grammar, vocabulary, organization, coherence, and mechanics. The theoretical assumption is that greater English exposure provides richer language input, which may improve students' vocabulary, grammar awareness, and ultimately their writing performance. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide is conceptual framework. In the study, English language exposure acts as the independent variable represented by X. Meanwhile, a writing skill acts as the dependent variable represented by Y. Students who frequently encounter English through various media receive more authentic language input. This input can enrich vocabulary, improve grammar awareness, and enhance overall language understanding. Therefore, it is expected that higher English exposure will positively contribute to student writing performance. The relationship can be seen in the framework where English language exposure influence writing skills. Next slide, please. Okay, this study used as a quantitative research method with a correlational research design. The purpose is to determine whether there is a relationship and influence between English language exposure and writing skills. The population consists of non-English department students. The sample will be approximately 35 students selected using purposive sampling. Purposive sampling is chosen because participants must meet specific criteria relevant to the research objective. Next slide, please. For the next slide is research instrument and data collection. Two instruments will be used in the study. The first instrument is an English exposure questionnaire to measure the level of student exposure to English. The second instrument is writing test to assess student writing performance using a writing rubrics. The data procedures are: the first one is distributing the questionnaire. Second is administering the writing test. The third is scoring student writing performance. And the last, analyzing the collected data. Next slide, please. Okay, for the next slide is data analysis and validity. After collecting the data, several statistical analyses will be conducted. First, descriptive statistic will be used to describe the data. Second, normality test will determine whether the data are normally distributed. Third, Pearson correlation will be used to examine the relationship between the two variables. Fourth, simple linear regression will be used to analyze the influence of English language exposure on writing skills. To ensure the data quality, content validity, and Cronbach alpha reliability will also be applied. Next slide, please. Okay, for the next slide is research finding. This study is expected to provide information about the level of student English language exposure, student writing skill performance, the relation between English exposure and writing skills, and the influence of English exposure on writing achievements. These findings are expected to contribute to English language learning research, especially among non-English department students. Next slide, please. So here's the expected result. The expected result is that students with the higher level of English exposure will demonstrate better writing performance. Students with low exposure are expected to have lower writing achievement. Meanwhile, students with moderate and high exposure are expected to achieve moderate to high writing performance. So this indicates a positive relationship between English language exposure and writing skills. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slide is discussion. The discussion is based on the assumption that English exposure provides authentic language input. Frequent exposure can enrich vocabulary and help students recognize grammar patterns naturally. Through continuous interaction with English content, students become more familiar with sentence structures and language use. As a result, their writing skill may improve over time. Next slide, please. Okay, for the next slide is conclusion. In conclusion, this study aims to investigate the influence of English language exposure on the writing skill of non-English department students. It is expected that students who receive greater English exposure will demonstrate better writing performance. The findings may provide useful insight for teachers and students regarding the importance of increasing English exposure outside the classroom. Next slide, please. So here's the reference. Thank you for the listening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Krishna, for the presentations. Okay, let's now move on to the fourth presenter. Our fourth presenter is Elsa Savitri. Time is yours, Elsa.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for the lecture and all participants for giving me the opportunity to present my research today. My name is Elsa Safitri, and this presentation I would like to share the result of my study entitled An Analysis of Student Experiences in Using BBC Learning English Podcast for Listening Comprehension. So during this presentation, I will explain the abstract background, research question, objective methodology, finding, discussion, and conclusion of the study. Next slide, please. Okay, before discussing the study in detail, I would like to briefly present the abstract of the research. This study analyzed student experiences in using the BBC Learning English podcast for listening comprehension. As we know, listening is crucial skill in English language learning. However, many students still face difficult in understanding spoken English because of less speech, unfamiliar vocabulary, and different pronunciation patterns. So, therefore, this study was conducted to explore how students experience using the BBC Learning English podcast as a tool for improving their listening comprehension. To achieve this objective, the research employed a qualitative approach using semi-structured interview with students who had experience using the podcast. And the finding revealed that students generally had positive experiences that report that the podcast have improved their listening skill, expand their vocabulary knowledge, and increase their motivation to learn English. And so overall, the study conclude that the BBC Learning English podcast is a valuable learning resource that can support and enhance listening comprehension, particularly to EFL learners. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I would like to explain the introduction of the study. First, let me discuss the background of the study. Many EFL students face difficult in listening comprehension due to fast speech, unfamiliar vocabulary, and limited exposure to authentic material. As we know, listening is one of the most important language skill, but it also one of the most challenging skill for English learner. For example, students often struggle to understand native speaker because of their speaking speed and pronunciation. Therefore, learners need access to authentic listening material that can help them improve their listening abilities. And one of the researchers that can support this process is the BBC Learning English podcast. It offers authentic listening practice through various interesting topic and learning material. As a result, students can gain more exposure to real English and develop their listening comprehension skill. Next, I will explain the research gap. Previous study have mainly examined the effectiveness and benefit of podcast in language learning. However, these studies focus on learning outcomes rather than student personal experience. In addition, student motivation, perceived benefit, and challenges when using the BBC Learning English podcast have not been explored in depth. So, therefore, this study aims to fill this gap by investigating student experience in using the podcast for listening comprehension. Next slide, please. Okay, so based on the background and research gap, the study is guided by four research questions. First, what are student experiences in using BBC Learning English podcast for listening comprehension? And the second, what benefit do students perceive for using BBC Learning English podcast? And the third, how does BBC Learning English podcast influence student motivation in learning English? And the last, what challenges do students face when using BBC Learning English podcast? So this question help the researcher understand student perspective toward the use of the podcast in listening learning. Next slide, please. Back to slide. Okay, so for the research objective, there are four, and the first to explore student experience in using BBC Learning English podcast for listening comprehension. The second to identify the benefit perceived by students from using BBC Learning English podcast, and the third to examine the influence of BBC Learning English podcast on student motivation in learning listen, and the last to investigate the challenges encountered by students when using BBC Learning English podcast. So overall, this objective aims to provide a comprehensive understanding of how the BBC Learning English podcast contribute to student listening development, motivation, and learning experience. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I would like to explain the literature review that support this study. First, let me discuss listening comprehension. According to Brown 2007, listening comprehension is an active process of understanding spoken language. It involves not only hearing sound, but also in interpreting meaning from what is being heard, being heard. Furthermore, many EFL learners face difficult in listening comprehension according to Hamoda 2013. Common challenges include fast speech, unfamiliar pronunciation, and limited vocabulary. As a result, students often struggle to understand spoken English accurately. So next, I will explain the role of podcasts in language learning. According to Stanley, podcasts provide authentic listening input and flexible learning opportunities for language learners. In addition, podcasts allow students to learn anytime and anywhere based on their own learning path. Also, Godin John also state that podcasts support autonomous learning and repeated listening. Therefore, learner can replay the audio several times to improve their understanding and listening skill. Okay, so moving on the BBC Learning English podcast. This podcast is widely used as a learning resource for English learner because it helps improve listening skill, vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. Moreover, it offers a variety of interesting topic and structured learning material that make learning more engaging. According to Ross, exposure to meaningful and authentic listening material can significantly support language development. Therefore, the BBC Learning English podcast can be a valuable tool for EFL learner. Okay, so the last is student listening experience. According to Van der Gief and Go, student learning experience are influenced by cognitive, emotional, and strategic factors. In other words, student understanding, feeling, motivation, and learning strategies all contribute to their learning outcome. So using the BBC Learning English podcast may provide both benefit and challenges. Some students may find it helpful for improving their listening skill and motivation, while others may experience difficulties such as fast speech or unfamiliar vocabulary. So overall, these theories and previous studies provide the foundation for understanding how students experience the use of BBC Learning English podcast in developing their listening comprehension. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I would like to explain the research methodology used in this study. First, regarding the research design, the study employ a qualitative research approach because it focuses on exploring student experience and perspective in depth. Next, for the participant, the study involved students who had experience using the BBC Learning English podcast. They were selected through purposive sampling to ensure that the participants were relevant to the research objective. And for the data collection, the researcher used semi-structured interview. Each interview lasts approximately 10 to 20 minutes and was conducted either face-to-face or online depending on the participant ability. Finally, for the data analysis, the study applied thematic analysis proposed by Brown and Clark. The process includes coding the interview data, categorizing similar response into themes, and interpreting in the findings to answer the research question. So overall, this methodology helped the researcher gain a deeper understanding of student experiences in using the BBC Learning English podcast for listening comprehension. Next slide. Okay, so next I would like to present the findings and discussion of the study. First, the findings show that students generally had positive experience using the BBC Learning English podcast. In addition, they report the improvement in their listening comprehension, vocabulary, and pronunciation skill. Furthermore, the podcast helped increase student motivation, confidence, and autonomous learning, allowing them to learn more independently. So, however, several challenges were also identified, including fast speech, limited vocabulary, lack of visual support, and environment distraction while listening. And, and based on the finding, the BBC Learning English podcast provides students with authentic listening practice, which is important for developing listening skill. Moreover, the podcast support flexible and independent learning because students can access and listening to the material anytime and anywhere. Teacher guidance remain important to help students overcome difficult, especially when dealing with unfamiliar vocabulary and fast speech. So overall, the podcast is useful tool for improving listening comprehension, but it should be supported by appropriate guidance from teacher. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the conclusion, the study found that students generally had positive experiences using BBC Learning English podcast. The podcast supported listening comprehension by improving vocabulary, pronunciation recognition, and understanding of spoken English. It also increased student motivation and encouraged autonomous learning through flexible access to learning material, although students face challenges such as fast speech, limited vocabulary, and lack of visual support. The podcast remind of valuable supplementary research for enhancing listening comprehension in EFL learning. Thank you for, okay, maybe that's all for my presentation. Thank you for listening to my presentation. That's all for me. I would like to return the time to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elsa, for the presentations. Okay, we are now approaching to the end of our sessions. So please welcome our fifth presenter, Asya Nizma Fadila. So Asya, time is yours, Asya.
Okay, thank you Rasya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon everyone. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to all the attendees who have taken the time to share today. My name is Ashanisma Fadilah. Today I will be presenting my seminar paper titled The Implementation of English Songs as Teaching Medium to Enhance Pronunciation in the English Classroom. Let's begin with the background of the research. We all know that pronunciation is one of the most essential skills in English communication. However, the reality shows that many EFL or English as a foreign language students still struggle with English sounds, word stress, rhythm, and intonation. This is where English songs come in as a promising solution. Songs provide authentic pronunciation models while also offering an enjoyable learning experience. More than that, research suggests that songs can effectively reduce students' anxiety, boost their motivation, and provide more natural opportunities for pronunciation practice. These reasons are what motivated me to investigate further how songs can serve as an effective medium for pronunciation teaching. Now let us look at the problem identification and the research gap that underpin this study. There are three main problems identified. The first, EFL students commonly experience difficulties with stress, rhythm, intonation, and certain English sounds. The second is pronunciation instruction in foreign language classroom is often not supported by engaging or creative learning materials. For the last is teachers need effective teaching media that can create an enjoyable and low-anxiety learning environment. In terms of the research gap, previous studies have focused more on vocabulary and listening skills rather than pronunciation. Furthermore, very few studies have explored the actual implementation process of songs in pronunciation teaching, and limited research examines both teacher practices and student perceptions of song-based pronunciation learning, particularly in Indonesian EFL classrooms. Okay. Based on the background and problem identification I have just explained, I formulated three research questions. The first one is, how are English songs implemented in teaching pronunciation in the English classroom? The second one is, how do English songs contribute to students' pronunciation improvement? And the last is, what are students' perceptions of learning pronunciation through English songs? For the research objective, the first one is to investigate the implementation of English songs in teaching pronunciation in the English classroom. The second one is to explore the contribution of songs to students' pronunciation improvement. And the last one is to identify students' perception learning pronunciation through songs. Now let us move on to the literature review that grounds this research. There are three main areas I reviewed. The first one is songs as a teaching medium. I draw upon Pavio's dual coding theory from 1986, which states that the combination of lyrics and melody can enhance memory retention and language processing. Additionally, Gardner's multiple intelligence theory from 1993 supports the idea that songs accommodate learners with musical intelligence and various learning styles. Second is pronunciation development. The communicative competence theory by Cannell and Swine from 1980 affirms that pronunciation is a key factor in successful communication. Jenkin's Lingua Franca Core from 2000 further suggests that pronunciation instruction should focus on features needed for international communication. The third is the relationship between English songs and pronunciation. In 2021, argued that Repeated singing provides authentic pronunciation modeling in an enjoyable context. Meanwhile, Fonseca Mora and colleges in 2011 demonstrated that songs naturally embed rhythm, stress, and intonation patterns for both listeners and singers. Okay, next, let me walk you through the research methodology. This study implies a qualitative descriptive design since my primary aim is to deeply explore how songs are used in the classroom and how students respond to them. In terms of participants, the research was conducted in a senior high school EFL class involving one English teacher and 25 to 30 students selected through purposes sampling. For data collection, I used three methods: direct classroom observation, semi-structured interviews with the teacher and students, and document analysis, including lesson plans, worksheets, and song lyrics used during instruction. For the data analysis, I applied thematic analysis and then performed triangulation across observation results, interview data, and documents to ensure the credibility and validity of the findings. Now, we come to one of the most interesting parts, is the research findings. There are 4 key findings I would like to highlight. The first one is positive attitudes. Students found song-based learning far more enjoyable, engaging, and less stressful compared to traditional pronunciation exercise. Notably, attendance in lessons that incorporated songs also improved. The second is pronunciation improvement. There were noticeable gains, especially in word stress, rhythm, and intonation. Students became significantly more aware of correct English pronunciation through repeated listening and singing activities. The third one is motivation and confidence. Students felt considerably less anxious when singing together as a group. What is particularly encouraging is that many of them started practicing English songs independently at home, demonstrating that the learning extended well beyond the classroom. The last one is challenges faced. Not everything went smoothly. Fast song tempos, unfamiliar vocabulary, and difficult sounds such as the and the posed challenges for some students. However, proper teacher guidance and thoughtful song selection proved to be key factors in mitigating these difficulties. Building on those findings, let me now discuss the deeper implications. The first one is structure integration works. Songs were implemented through 3 stages: pre-listening, while listening, and post-listening. This structured approach aligns well with the principles of communicative language teaching as proposed by Littlewood in 2011. The second one is suprasegmental gains can be theoretically explained. Songs naturally emphasize rhythm and stress patterns, which explain why improvements in the suprasegmental features were greater than gains in individual sound production. This finding is consistent with the work of Hahn in 2004 and Ludke and colleges in 2014. The third one is motivation leads to better learning outcomes. According to Dornier in 2001, positive emotional states drive active participation. When students generally enjoy the class, they are more willing to take risks in speaking, and this is especially critical in EFL context, where speaking anxiety tends to be high. And the last one is song selection truly matters. The teacher's scaffolding, including lyric analysis, vocabulary pre-teaching, and guided repetition, is absolutely essential. Songs must be carefully matched to students' proficiency levels and instructional goals in order to minimize challenges and maximize learning. And now we arrive at the final part of this presentation, is the conclusion. English songs are an effective, engaging, and practical medium for teaching pronunciation in EFL classrooms. The greatest improvements were seen in suprasegmental features, especially word, stress, rhythm, and intonation. Songs also successfully reduce speaking anxiety and increase student motivation, even encouraging independent practice outside of class. Finally, appropriate song selection and teacher scaffolding remain essential for overcoming the challenges students face. That concludes my presentation today. I hope the findings from this study can offer practical insight for English teachers who are looking for creative and effective ways to teach pronunciation. Thank you very much for your attention and time. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Asha, for the presentations. And now we have arrived at our final presentation of the day. Please give a warm welcome to our sixth and last presenter, Salsa Auliani. Salsa Auliani, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Rasha. Is my voice audible?
Yes, Salsa. It's
Okay.
pretty clear.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Salsa Auliani from the English Educational Department at Sultan Ageng Tirta at University. And today I am honored to present my presentation titled okay, let's wait for the presentation to okay. Okay. I will present EFL learners oral competence via role-play interventions. So this presentation is based on my comprehensive research seminar article, and in this study, I address a crucial persistent bottleneck in English as a foreign language settings, like the transition from silent, theoretical grammar comprehension to dynamic, unscripted, and real-time speech. So, next slide, please. Okay. To provide a high-level overview, so this study is a macroanalytical meta-synthesis of contemporary research published between the years 2020 and 2026. So the core research problem lies in the traditional pedagogical heavy-handedness toward rote linguistic competence, namely, and vocabulary memorization, also prescriptive grammar formulas. So at the cost of the multidimensional fluid synchronization, it's required in authentic real-world spoken interactions. So to dissect how role-play intervention catalyze oral performance, there's this architectural taxonomy composed of 6 critical parameters. The first one is phonological accuracy and prosody. So this is how learners manage suprasegmental features and intonation in active speech. And second one is lexical diversity or type token ratio. So this measured using corpus linguistics metrics like the type token ratio, or we call it as TTR, to assess vocabulary range. And then the third one is structural complexity. So this is the integration of subclauses and more complex syntax under communicative pressure. And the fourth one is turn-taking mechanics and synchrony. So this adhering to conversational rhythms and cooperative transitions. The fifth one is strategic repair. So this is the deployment of negotiation tactics and circumlocution when processing blockades occur. And the last one is social affective filter regulation. This simply overcoming anxiety boundaries. So the ultimate finding is that roleplay serves as a cognitive and emotional conduit and rapidly transforming passive language knowledge into active interactional capability. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the introduction of my paper, where we confront the core epistemological challenge of EFL oral instruction. In traditional second language acquisition theory, we often gloss over the profound structural differences between ESL and EFL settings. Like in ESL countries, learners step outside their classrooms and are immediately immersed in an English-speaking society. But in contrast, the EFL landscape is structurally and socially isolated. English exposure is restricted to rigid institutional blocks of time, usually dominated by teacher-centric monologue, explicit grammar rule memorization, and sterile isolated drills. So this creates a persistent, frustrating phenomenon like students who easily score an A on standardized grammar exams or vocabulary worksheets, yet they fail completely to execute a basic real-time spoken exchange. So this friction exists because of a historical misunderstanding. For decades, like structuralist approaches treated language as a formal code system that can be mathematically reconstructed, but the speech is not a passive additive equation of grammar plus vocabulary, but it is a highly volatile, real-time psycholinguistic operation. So to overcome this failure point, we must look to experiential, text-based interventions like role play, where learners are forced to inhabit alternative identities and negotiate meaning in real time, also build linguistic resilience. Next slide, please. Alright, so to address this challenge systematically, my research blueprint is structured around three main factors. The research gap. So while we know communicative activities are useful, there remains a lack of microanalytical clarity on how distinct stages of task structure translate declarative grammatical rules into procedural interactional ability, and this leads directly to my research questions, like how do varying tiers of role-play scaffolding, ranging from tightly controlled scripts to open-ended, spontaneous simulations, and systematically refine specific communicative subsets like phonology, syntax, lexical depth, turn-taking, and strategic repair. And consequently, my research objective is to construct a clear multidimensional framework that teachers and curriculum developers can use to design, monitor, and evaluate progressive role-play tasks. Like we want to map out how to safely transition a student from high anxiety and low accuracy to high autonomy and fluid interaction. So next slide, please. Alright, so our analysis is anchored by two major pillars of language acquisition theory. The first is the classic communicative competence model, pioneered by Cannell and Swade in 1980, and expanded by Silse Murcia. So this model reminds us that oral competence is not a monolith. It requires the balance of four coordinates. Like the first one is linguistic competence for vocabulary and grammar rules, and then social linguistic competence to match the social register and cultural appropriateness of an environment, And then this core competence to ensure structural cohesion across multi-turn sentences. And the last one is strategic competence, which is the coping mechanism used to repair spoken breakdowns. And then our second pillar is the socio-constructivist engine. So we draw heavily on Lev Vygotsky's zone of primal proximal development, or ZPD, which proves that linguistic cognition develops through socially mediated collaborative interaction. And we'll link this directly to Michael Long's interaction hypothesis. Long argues that language acquisition is accelerated when communication encounters friction, when learners have to ask, "What do you mean?" or "Can you say that again?" They actively negotiate the meaning. So this dynamic mental negotiation is the exact engine behind language acquisition. And then finally, we address Stephen Krashen's affective filter. Like spoken production is deeply emotional. By utilizing role plays, we introduce the individuation. When a student acts as a fictional character, mistakes are projected onto the character, not their personal ego. So this can lower their anxiety and frees up working memory capacity and builds baseline conversational self-efficacy. So with these theoretical coordinates established, we can now look at the methodological taxonomy of role-play intervention. Next slide, please. Taxonomy. And then this is the taxonomy of role-play tasks. The first one is highly scripted, structured dialogues and card cues, targets beginner confidence, accurate phonological linkages, prosody, and anxiety mitigation. And in the second one, we have semi-structured. So this contextual constraints but open-ended lexical paths enhances socio-pragmatic register switching and dynamic turn-taking. And then the third one, we have spontaneous wait, simulation. This is the open multi-variable crisis prompts, and this sharpens high-stakes critical thinking, strategic loops, and ultimate lexical recovery. Next slide, please. And then we move to linguistic subskill growth. We have the phonological control. So this authentic scenario embedding encourages natural prosody. Learners mimic suprasegmental features and natural range reductions and target contours. And the next one is lexical richness, which is this empirical evidence tracks a significant rise in type token ratio, or TTR, like the before, and then shifting learners away from generic high-frequency fallback vocabulary. So the next one is synthetic complexity, where communicative pressure expands the use of subordinate clauses and complex structures balanced by systematic pre- or post-analytical feedback. Next slide, please. So now we have societal pragmatic shift. The first one is execution of speech acts. So the learners master mitigated requesting, apologizing, and refusal tactics corresponding to social hierarchies. For example, like peers versus the executive. And then the next one is adjacency pairs. This establishes automatic conversational pacing and rhythmic responses. And then interactional synchrony, like this builds critical recognition of non-vocal drops, filler cues, and strategic backhand signals to hold or yield conversational turns. And then the last one, It is strategic repair groups. This activates circumlocution, approximation, and cooperative appeals when vocabulary limits are encountered during spontaneous speech. Mm, And then next slide, please. And then we have eradicating speaking anxiety. So, foreign language anxiety, especially when speaking in front of peers, it's a massive roadblock. And when a student is paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake, their brain gets crowded with anxious thoughts. So this leaves almost no working memory space available to actually plan and produce speech. So this simple mental shift lowers the emotional threat of being judged, and it frees up their working memory, encourage them to take communication risk, and helps them speak with confidence. Over time, the confidence built while playing these characters transfers directly back to their own voice, permanently upgrading their speaking self-efficacy. And next slide, please. Okay, so now it's the digital learning frontier. So as we look to the future of EFL education, we must examine how modern technology is expanding the boundaries of roleplay. So digital integration is transforming roleplays from simple classroom activities into a highly scalable, immersive learning experiences. The first one, we are seeing the rise of AI-mediated voice agents. So using large language models, students can now practice speaking in real time with virtual characters. So these AI agents dynamically adjust their vocabulary and speed based on the student's level, offering a private zero-anxiety space for students to practice anytime, anywhere. Second one is immersive VR or IVR. So this takes role play to a deeply physical level by putting on a VR headset. So a student is instantly transported to a busy international airport or a high-stakes corporate boardroom, and this sensory environment triggers real physical and emotional reactions, leading it to incredibly high rates of language retention. And then the last one is video asynchronous platforms. So this allows students to record and review their own performance, and this turns their speaking practice into an objective artifact and encouraging deep self metacognitive monitoring, and as students spot their own hesitation patterns, body language, and pronunciation habits. Next slide, please. Okay, so now it is to make sure that role-play activities lead to measurable language growth rather than falling into chaotic, unstructured chatter. So educators must follow a strict multi-phase operational framework. And my research synthesized this into three distinct phases. The first one is pre-task phase, which is about schema activation and priming. So before the role play starts, the teachers must set the stage. This involves introducing target vocabulary, mapping out the social context, and providing the structural scaffoldings students will need. And the second one is the during task phase. So during the actual simulation, the teacher's role shifts from a lecturer to an unobtrusive observer, and the instructor must resist the urge to interrupt the conversation to correct minor grammar mistakes. Instead, they should take detailed notes on common errors and great examples of strategic communication, and allowing the students to stay fully immersed in the interaction. And then the last one is post-task phase, which is where raw experience is transformed into lasting language growth. So this phase focuses on anonymized error correction, so sociolinguistic reflection, and student self-evaluation, helping learners identify their own strengths and areas for independent study. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, uh, the extensive research that I present proves that role-play interventions are not just fun filler activities, they are the essential engine needed to upgrade an EFL learner's overall communication skills across linguistic, pragmatic, and emotional dimensions. If we want to prepare our students for a globalized world, our schools and universities must evolve. So we must move past outdated testing models that rely heavily on passive, multiple choice grammar exams and vocabulary worksheets. Instead, we must place structured simulations and speaking tasks directly at the heart of our daily lessons and standardized testing. So true language proficiency is measured by a student's ability to connect with others and survive real-world communication barriers, not by flawless grammar in a testing vacuum. So it by committing to experiential simulation-based learning, we can transform foreign language education and turn hesitant language students into confident global communicators. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I would now like to open the floor to any questions, feedback, or advice you may have. Is there
Okay.
any?
Okay. Thank you so much, Salsa, for the presentation. So we have now come to the end of today's presentations. What a remarkable sessions it has been. 6 outstanding presentation covering a wide range of important topics in our field. So I would like to express our deepest gratitude to our 6 presenters. Me, Rasha Denelka, Ibnu Kowil Amin, Maulana Krisna Handika, Elsa Safitri, and Asha Nisma Fadilah, and the last one, Salsa Auliani, for your hard work, dedication, and the quality of your research. So I hope today's seminar presentation has been a meaningful and enriching experience for all of us. May the knowledge shared here inspire future research and collaborations. Once again, thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a nice day, everyone.